What Tyleik Williams is bringing to the Detroit Lions is nothing short of a freight train. I'm telling you, the Lions are getting some really, really good feedback right now about the 28th pick overall in the 2025 NFL Draft, Tyleik Williams. Before we get into this video, I'd love to ask you guys just a couple of quick questions. Number one, are you finally in agreement with Brad Holmes and the decision to take Tyleik Williams? Or are you still having a little bit of a rub here that maybe he should have went a different direction? And number two, I would just love to know who is your favorite defensive tackle prior to the current guys on the roster. So not Ali McNeil, not DJ Reader, not Levi Onwuzurike. Prior to this current roster, who was your favorite defensive tackle for the Lions? Now I'd love to get into a little bit about what happened on draft night. So we're sitting in Radio Row in Green Bay covering the draft from the Radio Row room. And we start to hear, things that Brad Holmes has received multiple calls, towards the end of the first round. And the thinning draft board really kind of put him in a position that he had to make a pick. There was some enticing options for Brad Holmes. And to trade back from 28, into the early second round or as late as the middle of the second round, it just wasn't enough for Brad to move off of his pick and potentially lose out on the player that they wanted, which was Tyleik Williams. Now, Brad doesn't want to make headlines in April or May, right? That's just not what he's all about. He said that to us many, many, many times. But he sure does want to make some headlines, in January, in February at some point, and we're hoping that he does. But he definitely made some headlines by taking Tyleik Williams. And the reason why I say that is because, well, number one, this was the first Ohio State defensive lineman that the Lions have selected in the first round ever. Apart from that, there's a certain faction of this One Pride fan base that has begged, cried, and even pleaded with Brad Holmes to take a defensive end. And they're not happy. And a lot of them aren't happy today. And so much so that some of them even drank themselves to sleep on a live stream because they were so unhappy with Brad Holmes. Here's the kicker, right? The last time the Lions selected a defensive tackle in the first round was 2011. That's when they drafted Nick Fairley. And my answer to the question in 2010 was Ndamukong Suh. Back-to-back picks in the first round. So it's been 14 plus seasons since the Lions have had a first-round defensive tackle talent on this roster. Williams obviously is a very powerful, agile defensive tackle who has shown the ability to be very disruptive. His combination of size and strength alone is very unique. And the ability that he has moving is something that we haven't seen. The athleticism, it really makes him a perfect blend for this Lions defense. Whether it's nose tackle, or defensive tackle, he can play both. Yep, he can play up to 335 pounds, and he moves just fine. He could probably drop 20 pounds and become a sack master for the Detroit Lions from the interior. Now, that doesn't mean it's 15 sacks, but anything north of 6 is pretty good for a defensive tackle. Now, I will say this. His tape, it's not perfect, right? But you tell me what rookie's tape is perfect, because there isn't one out there. I would love to watch it if you find one. But what we see from Tyleik Williams is he's just a run-stuffing defensive tackle. Very impressive with his quickness to the point of contact, initial burst, into the gaps, and man, does he just cause chaos into the pocket. And this is exactly what we've been missing, partly because Ali McNeil got injured last year, and DJ Reader was working his way back after a major injury. Tyleik posted an elite run-stuffing grade, of course by PFF, of an 88.6 in his final season at Ohio State. Now, his football IQ is something that a lot of people have been talking about. A lot of the analysts all over the place have been praising him as a film junkie, which is what he's known to be, how he studies opponents extensively, and he even looks for these little deficiencies in the tape that he can then exploit on game day. I don't know about you, but this is exactly what I'm looking forward to out of Tyleik Williams. I can't wait to see it all come together for him in week 1 against the Packers. Now, when you watch his film, I will tell you that you're seeing a player, and you're getting a player that's seen it before. And what I mean by that is the game is almost like slow for him. And he's progressed, from his first year at Ohio State to his third season at Ohio State. You can see that something's progressed for him. And him being able to process as quickly as he does, keeping his eyes into the backfield, always penetrating the backfield, following the ball, and does it all while he's engaged with the blocker. It really helps Tyleik to make his move, right? And then make a play. He sheds blocks with ease. He stacks blocks even easier. He anchors down on double teams with this move, this kind of back step drop move that I really haven't seen before. At least I haven't seen it enough to recognize where I've seen it before. He uses his arms to his advantage, and he definitely gobbles up the runner. So to say all of this, to start of this video is to say that the Detroit Lions got an extremely good defensive tackle who does have all of the makings to become a great defensive tackle and could be the next great defensive tackle of the NFL. There's a lot more that I could say about Tyleik that words really just, it doesn't describe it. It doesn't do him justice. You really just have to watch the film, which unfortunately I can't share here. Otherwise I would. And we're working on that. Promise you, we're working on that. But he's definitely a special talent. And I'm extremely happy, the Lions went in this direction. And it's the direction that I expected them to go in. Some of you that watched the draft day coverage, you would have seen me hold up my book. And this is my book for the college scouting when I go down to the combine. And Tyleik Williams was number 1 on my list out of group 1 for the defensive lineman. And he was number 1 for a reason. He ended up being my number 1 favorite defensive tackle. So I'm not surprised. Let's just put it that way. I'm not surprised. I called the pick live. That's how surprised I wasn't. I knew that the Lions were going to go after Tyleik Williams, especially when I felt a couple of things happened in the first round that maybe were a little bit of a surprise. I wasn't so much surprised that Shamar Stewart went where he went. Hearing the things that we were hearing about, Brad Holmes potentially having some options to move forward. If the right player wasn't there, it wasn't going to happen. And so I think that Tyleik kind of fell to the Lions. I think that he probably should have been taken earlier. Apparently, a lot of teams passed, and I'm not sure why. Now, I will also point this out. I understand that there's a lot of the fan base that still hasn't accepted the selection, right? And I can assure you that he was selected to address some very serious concerns right now along the interior of the defensive line. Let me just point a few of them out, and hopefully things will make a little bit more sense. Number 1, we have Lee McNeil, who's probably going to be out until October. At least that's what we're hearing, is it's probably October at the earliest. And then there's Levi Onwuzurike, who's only had 1 decent season. And so he's a potential to be injured at any moment's notice. We hope that he's not. But with a back injury, a lingering back injury that has bothered him for a few seasons, you just never know. And then there's DJ Reader's contract. He's in the final year of his contract. So if there wasn't a more perfect opportunity or timing to take a defensive tackle, I don't know of a better opportunity or timing. This pick, Brad talks about BPA all the time. This pick kind of rings a little bit more to need, but I feel like it's a coincidence. I don't really feel like it was a need pick per se. I do believe that Tyleik Williams was the best player available at that position. I think that Tyleik would have been the best player available a few spots ahead of that, but I wasn't the one making the call. Now, at Tyleik's initial press conference, so I want to get into a few other things here about who this guy is and why the Lions absolutely struck gold on this pick. He expressed excitement about joining the Lions and believing that he would have been gone. Had the Lions not taken him at 28, that he would have been gone at pick 30 to the Bills. So again, is it a need pick? No. I think that Brad surveyed the room, right? And he knew that looking at these other draft boards across the league, from the mocks that the Lions do and who they think they're going to take, probably knew that Tyleik wasn't going to last much longer, and taking a trade back just wasn't going to fit. So who is Tyleik Williams? Well, I can tell you this. I can tell you how big he is. Dude's 6'3", 334 pounds. At the NFL Combine, when I had an opportunity to watch him, he only completed the position drills, right? Like the rip curl drills and the bag drills and things like that. He didn't do any of the agility tests. Pro Football Focus gave him a run grade of 88.6, which was 4th best among all FBS interior defensive linemen. He had 20 run stops, which was 6th best among all interior defensive linemen last season. Throughout his college performance, in 2024 alone, this guy pulled down 46 tackles, 8 TFLs, 2.5 sacks, 1 pass breakup, and 16 quarterback hurries from the interior. In 2023, 51 tackles, 13 TFLs, and 3 sacks. Now, I know some of you aren't very impressed of the low sack numbers, and I'm going to touch on that in just a moment. Matter of fact, we're both going to touch on it. Myself and Corey Besh are going to touch on it in here in just a second. So, career stats over 4 seasons. 137 tackles, 27 tackles for loss, 11.5 sacks, 10 passes defensed, 1 forced fumble, and 1 fumble recovery. The way that his position or what he was asked to do kind of progressed throughout college, and we're going to get into that right here. Let's hear what Corey had to say.
One of the things that I think fans were talking about Tyleik is that he didn't have a lot of pass rush production in college, and it's, again, this is a scheme and you got to get deep into the analysis to understand what was his role in that defensive line, right? What is the role of his role on the Lions defensive line? Is he a run stopper first, right, to plug those gaps and occupy 2 blockers so that your edge can get free, right? Is he forcing the interior of the offensive line to protect and set that pocket early? Is he collapsing the pocket? There are many roles that a defensive lineman plays besides just rushing the passer, and they complement each other, right? So you got 2 interior D linemen that are then the core of the interior, but then you got exterior D linemen, edge rushers that their schemes and games and looping back around and slide protections and all these things that offenses will do to counteract those star edge rushers. And so the key, I think, on a defensive line is having versatile players who can do multiple things, right? And can complement the skill sets of the guys next to them. So
Tyleik scheme. So I wrote this down. I forgot to come back to this because you mentioned Tyleik Williams, scheme at Ohio State and how Some of the fan base or analysts were saying that he didn't have a whole lot of pass rush at Ohio State. But you mentioned scheme and how he was used. And I thought that's a very good point because Tyleek in his first season at Ohio State was asked to be a pass rushing defensive lineman. And he had a very good first year. I think it was 5.5 sacks his first season. And then he had a total of, 10, 11, 12 throughout his career. So it slowed down a little bit. And the reason why is because then the scheme changed for him. Ohio State brought in some different athletes to do different things. They asked him to be a run stuffer. So it's just like looking at why Nick Scorton didn't have a ton of production, at Texas A&M when he came from Purdue and led the Big Ten in sacks. Well, he was asked to be a run stuffer and play within the scheme, different scheme. I look at Nick Scorton as the Purdue guy, not the Texas A&M guy, and what his ability could be. So that, again, casual fans may not know this, may not get that deep into it, may not hear about it. And I think that's part of what makes this show so fun is that we try to look for these things and try to identify it and flush it out, and try to give us the best opportunity at understanding what. We know that the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl and had a lot of success last year. And a large part was because their defensive line on the interior did a bang-up job, right? Winning their one-on-ones and getting after the quarterback. Now, that doesn't happen without a good defensive backfield. That doesn't happen without the guys to the right or left of them not doing their job. It all works together. And this is exactly why you see Brad Holmes take this pick now, in this position now. And one thing I'll throw at you is, if you look at all of the picks that Brad Holmes has made in the first round, even when he's had 2 picks in the first round, he's never taken the same position twice. There's a reason for that. When you look around our team, there's a very good football player at about half of the starting positions right now, or about a third of the starting positions. So Brad Holmes is putting a very good football player all over the field. And very good, I mean first round. But let's back that up for a second. Amon-Ra St. Brown was taken, in the 4th round? He's a first rounder. Aleem McNeil was taken in the 3rd round. He's a first rounder. When you go around and take a look at what's on this team, Brian Branch should have been a first rounder. Kirby Joseph should have been a first rounder. You get what I'm saying? There's literally probably 13 or 14 football players on this team, of which half of them were not taken in the first round, that legit should have been first round picks based on what they've done in the NFL today. Yeah, he's going to have a lot of pressure on him, largely because the fan base is going to get after Brad if Tyleek doesn't work out, which I'm not worried about. Look, Williams, his play style, his athletic ability, they're eerily similar to Aleem McNeil. Aleem McNeil was a 3rd round pick. I think that Tyleek Williams is far and away better than where Aleem McNeil started, which means I think that he's going to hit the ground running. We're going to find out in camp this summer. Let me give you some insights from Brad Holmes about this selection. And this comes after years of anticipation, right? And that Brad Holmes mentioned that he's been watching Tyleek Williams for a long time. He's been monitoring him as he progressed through his college career. And it's a very short drive away down to Ohio State from Allen Park to be able to go get a glimpse, at Tyleek Williams. So Holmes stated that, he was going to fit right in like a glove, indicating, confidence that Tyleek Williams' ability to integrate into the team's culture and the system are going to be seamless. Here's a few quotes by the guys that make things happen in Detroit. Brad Holmes: Tyleek is a guy who plays with violent hands and great feet. He's going to be a force in the trenches. Dan Campbell: we wanted a guy who could dominate the line of scrimmage, and Tyleek fits that mold perfectly. And Ray Agnew: I think there's a lot more growth in this kid. This kid has a lot of upside. He's got a chance to be really, really good player for us, and we're excited he was there for us. So even, as you can tell, Ray didn't expect for him to be there. He's got a chance to be a really good player, a really good run player, and I think that he's underrated as a pass rusher. This kid has a chance to be a force in the middle. And I believe all of that. I do, from all those guys. And the tape backs it up. Look, Lions fans, you know that I don't BS you. I come from a place of facts and stats and analytics, and now we've brought somebody else into the channel that's even going to push that narrative even further for us. And it's a good narrative that we want to come from a place of facts and stats and a good holistic approach at giving you some really good information about your football team. There was an importance placed on defensive line in this draft, especially defensive line depth. The Lions had a ton of injuries last year, and we hope that it doesn't happen again. And the line that, really faced the most challenges, well, they need to run it back this year. And they're all going to run it back this year because they're all back on the team. Now, the injuries alone gave the Lions some heartburn, right? They wanted to figure out a way to make sure that doesn't happen again. But at the same time, how do you make your defensive line better? How do you get deeper at a position that seemingly already had enough football players last season to go the distance? Winning 15 football games with a defensive line that was decimated is not easy to do. I think Tyleek Williams' impact on this defensive line is going to be immediate. I know there's a lot of people out there that have questioned Williams' ability and the fact that his sack numbers in college or his production numbers in college weren't as great or, as maybe they wanted them to be, specifically sack numbers, because his other numbers were great. I feel that his true value on this team immediately, again, as a rookie, is how he's going to affect the players around him. He's definitely a momentum changer, right? He can create that big play, and it just gets those guys fired up. Pass rush ability, he has it. Believe it or not, he has it. You heard what we said about technique and scheme. In my opinion, the scheme is the reason why his pass rush ability slowed up a little bit the last few seasons at Ohio State. It wasn't because he can't do it. It's because Ohio State, asked him to do something different. Pass rush ability, it lives within him, and I can't wait to see it unleashed. Look, Tyreek is dynamic, and he's going to be a great addition to this defense. The film study proves the player. The potential to be more than just a run stuffer is there. The pass rush ability, it's inside him. I think that he possesses the skills to be a very versatile defensive tackle, capable of impacting both the run and the pass game. Look, he's going to be the next cornerstone of this defense. He's going to be around a long time. I see Tyreek becoming probably one of the best defensive tackles in the game. Give him a couple of seasons to prove himself. But this was the right move by Brad Holmes. It was the right move to bolster the defensive line. It was the right move for many more reasons. But this is how the Lions continue to build and build sustained success, is with a move like this. Congratulations, Tyreek Williams, on becoming a Detroit Lion.